One-page rules have been releasing their vampire faction for a little while now, and I've been quietly building an army of undead in the background. Hey, remember when I painted that Cyclops with oils and it looked really gnarly and cool, but then I just kind of forgot oils existed? Well, I want to try them again because it looks like you can get some cool speed paint techniques using them. So I have these Bat Horrors primed with a dark reddish brown from Army Painter. Then using my airbrush I gave them a nice white gradient from above to get some easy shading. I want everything to look kind of red in the shadows, so I'll mostly be using that as my recess colour. Very little black on this model. So the first step is to create an oily surface for future layers. I mix up a deep reddish brown and just throw it all over the model. In this process I've learned that oil paints can be thinned with mineral spirits quite a bit, and they kind of need to be, otherwise they tend to gunk up quite a lot. So I go back and forth here experimenting until I've got a fairly similar consistency to how you would with acrylics. The more thinned it is, the longer you need to leave it, because the next step we want to leave a thin layer of the paint, and if you wipe it away too soon you'll leave more mineral spirits which then evaporate quickly. So onto that, and I get a makeup sponge and clean most of it off any raised areas. The stuff in the recesses stays, and later we can mix it back into our other colours to get a smooth gradient to shadows. You might notice here that I've also just covered the skin. As you have to work with areas that are still wet, it seemed best to take each area at a time so I could work with it as fresh as possible rather than trying to do the whole thing in one sitting. On to my choice of colours. For the skin I wanted them to look almost human coloured but kind of also a bit leathery. So I went for a mustard yellow and then mixed a pale pink for the highlights. The key idea for this method, or so I can tell from my hours and hours of watching YouTube tutorials, is you have a blending brush that never touches mineral spirits, so it doesn't ever break down the paints, it just mixes them together. Then you have a separate brush that you use to apply the paint. I start with my mid-tone, putting it onto the main areas before coming back with the blending brush and just blending it all in. Oh, I forgot how easy it is to get such a nice, smooth transition here. It's awesome. As I go along with this, I'm learning that you don't really need as much as I started with. It does deposit quite a bit onto a surface, and then when you blend it out, it kind of drags it all across. So you can do just quite a small amount of your colour and then blend that out bit by bit. As I'm going, I'm learning these little quirks and how much of each step to do, and it's just really satisfying. Once there's a lot of yellow, I add in my pink highlights in the same way, putting a small amount, blending it in, adding more if needed. After this, I also kind of experimented a different way round, adding the highlights, so the pink, first, and then blending them with some yellow in. It didn't make too much difference, but it doesn't seem as good because it's kind of hard to get an idea where your mid-tone is supposed to be when it's not already on. Still, good to try these things. Because oils are thicker, I feel like I'm struggling to get that nice crisp detail. I will do this more and see if that's possible, maybe with smaller brushes and different consistencies. But for now I'm going to focus on those smooth, creamy blends, and when it dries I can use the acrylics in the way I'm comfortable with. No method needs to be strictly separate or superior for every single part of the hobby, and it's about finding a host of techniques that we can use to get the results we want. That's the whole technique, and after the skin was done I did the exact same thing with the other parts. Most videos I've seen on this will use kind of a darker version of their base colour as the shade, but I kept it as that dark brown so everything looked a bit monotone. I probably should have tried this technique in the traditional way it's used first, but is it really one of my videos if I'm not making it unnecessarily hard for myself? A couple of things I'm noticing are that you do have to plan your time a little bit better. With acrylics I'm doing things in layers, so if I have 5 minutes I can grab my wet palette or a pot, throw something down and then leave it to dry and come back later on. The skin took about an hour, which was quick for the nice blends I got, but once I'd started I couldn't just put it down and come back to it tomorrow. This also comes up when you want to move back to acrylics. I might be overcautious, but I'm leaving the Mini for a full day after using the oils because things get awkward if they're still wet when you start using water-based paint. Now I go back for some cool details and use a mix of basic skin tone and Trooper White to do some pasty texture on the skin, creating kind of stringy muscle effects. I just layer these up and then move on to the eyes, painting them white, as well as giving the metallic colours a bright white edge highlight. I also bring the hair up to a bright white at this step. Now I'm on to basing, and I start with a solid burnt sand dry brush. I move on to bone white to highlight even brighter, and then I feel like it's looking a bit too warm. Because I want this to feel a bit more like grey and dead, I wash the whole thing with Null Nile. Right, when I first started my vampires, I wanted to try that spooky underlighting thing again. You remember the one I did on my Lust Demon ages ago, where I painted yellow from underneath so they looked like they were lit from hell? Well, with this one I'm doing it with a green, spooky, necromantic energy, I suppose. I think there's something in it, or maybe I'm just being pig-headed and I don't know a bad idea when it hits me in the face. So for these models, I'm getting my necrotic flesh in the airbrush and I'm just doing a light spray from below. This tints the model's underside, but kind of gets rid of some of that nice detail from earlier too, so I don't know, maybe not the best. While the airbrush was out, I used a bit of Iamden yellow over the eyes to get a basic glow effect. Finally, I used ice yellow to create some highlights for the spooky underglow. I then re-established the white on the glowing eyes. And there we go, that's the unit of these guys done. Overall, I think some of the more batshit ideas need to be reined in, like the underglow maybe just needs to be done as a slight highlight, but I will be doing more stuff with oils to get better at them because they just seem really fun and really cool. Subscribe for more content like this to watch me mess around with oils and probably give myself more headaches than I need to. And if you want to see them used in a battle report for the next video, because that will be the next one coming, Vampire Counts vs Saurians, baby! And yeah, hope you enjoyed that. Bye!